territory remains occupied. We will not abandon this cause, and we will not rest until the objective is achieved. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I shall now put the draft resolution to the vote. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/312 please raise their hand? Okay, we recorded 12, right? Okay. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to, the result of the vote is as follows. 12 votes in favor, 1 vote against, 2 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I pass the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, Madam President, Madam President, this day may go down in history as a day when, after 3/4 of a century, the international community at last made the right choice on the path towards correcting the many years of historical injustice done to Palestine and the legitimate aspirations of its heroic people. Because it was a simple question: are the Palestinians worthy of being part of the global family, fully participating in all of the decisions of international life? And a question that we have constantly answered with consent. And when Israel was welcomed into the UN, and when dozens of states also released from the colonial yoke were welcomed into the UN. However, our American colleagues believe differently. Having for the 5th time since the beginning of the exacerbation in Gaza their veto, they have once again demonstrated what they really think of the Palestinians. For Washington, they do not deserve to have their own state. They are only a barrier on the path towards realizing the interests of Israel. For that reason, the United States is ready to the last to turn a blind eye to the crimes of Israel against the civilians in Gaza, not noting the illegal settlement building activity in West Jerusalem on the West Bank. The aim is to break the Palestinians' will, to force them once and for all to submit to the occupying power, to turn them into servants and second-class persons, and perhaps to once and for all force them out of their native territory. That policy is only having the opposite impact. At present, an absolute majority of the global community supports Palestine's application to become a full member of the World Organization. The suffering of Palestinian civilians is resounding in the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. In countries that supply weapons to West Jerusalem, there are louder and louder voices calling for those supplies to be banned. Today's use of the veto by the US delegation is a hopeless attempt to stop the inevitable course of history. The results of the vote, where Washington was practically in complete isolation, speak for themselves. With the most playing into the hands of the most irrational actions by their ally and reluctant to find just solutions on the basis of the existing international legal basis, is a direct path to the further sliding into the mire of war, which could encompass the entire region. If the United States and Israel benefit from this, then it will only be in the short term. At the same time, Washington will once and for all remove itself from the list of peace-loving and respected states, having fully shared responsibility with its Israeli allies for the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. And that is not worthy of a great power, and history will not forgive you for that. We call on the United States to listen to the voice of reason, to think about the consequences of their decisions, and to immediately join in the efforts of the other members of the Security Council to establish an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation and pass the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. The United States has worked vigorously and with determination to support Palestinian statehood in the context of a comprehensive peace agreement that would permanently resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since the attacks of October 7, President Biden has been clear that sustainable peace in the region can only be achieved through a two-state solution with Israel's security guaranteed. There is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace and with dignity in a state of their own. And there is no other path that leads to regional integration between Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. We also have long been clear that premature actions here in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. As members of the Security Council, we have a special responsibility to ensure that our actions further the cause of international peace and security and are consistent with the requirements of the UN Charter. As reflected in the report of the Admission Committee, there was not unanimity among committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria for membership as set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter. For example, there are unresolved questions as to whether the applicant meets the criteria to be considered a state. We have long called on the Palestinian Authority to undertake necessary reforms to help establish the attributes of readiness for statehood, and note that Hamas, a terrorist organization, is currently exerting power and influence in Gaza, an integral part of the state envisioned in this resolution. For these reasons, the United States voted no on this Security Council resolution. Again, the United States continues to strongly support a two-state solution. This vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, but instead is an acknowledgement that it will only come from direct negotiations between the parties. A central focus of U.S. policy prior to October 7, the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks, was to promote normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors, and, as a critical element of a normalization package, generate tangible benefits and a political horizon for the Palestinian people. This was based on the U.S. judgment that normalization is the most viable pathway to make progress on what had been an intractable situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In the aftermath of October 7, conversations on potential normalization and a political horizon for the Palestinians that would lead to statehood and membership at the UN have continued. Hamas and its Iranian backers would probably prefer this effort not succeed, but we are determined to see it through. It remains the U.S. view that the most expeditious path towards statehood for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners. We believe this approach can tangibly advance Palestinian goals in a meaningful and enduring way. We also believe, in light of Iran's unprecedented and outrageous actions over the last week, that Israel's neighbors would stand to benefit greatly from normalization. The United States is committed to intensifying its engagement with the Palestinians and the rest of the region, not only to address the current crisis in Gaza, but to advance a political settlement that will create a path to Palestinian statehood and membership in the United Nations. the United States will continue to oppose unilateral measures that undermine the prospect of a two-state solution. This includes any actions that violate the principles that Secretary Blinken has emphasized for months, that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism. There should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, and the size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced. As we have said before, we believe a two-state solution coupled with these elements is the best way to achieve a durable peace in the region, along with security for Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to the representative of France. Je vous remercie, Madame la
Thank you, Madam President. France would like to thank Algeria for proposing this resolution, which it voted in favor of. It is time to achieve a global political settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the basis of the two-state solution, the only thing that can respond to the long-term security needs of Israel, as well as the legitimate aspirations of Palestinians for a state. As the President of the Republic recalled, France is not shying away from this issue, and it is in this context that, upon the initiative of Algeria, we are in favor of raising the status of Palestine in the UN and its admission as a full member. This admission must allow for the resumption of a decisive and irreversible process to implement the two-state solution and the strengthening of the Palestinian Authority in the Palestinian territories in Gaza and in the West Bank. It must be able to effectively and efficiently exercise its responsibilities across the territories of a future Palestinian state. The conflict in Gaza, triggered by the terrorist attack by Hamas and other terrorist groups on the 7th of October, which we condemn in the strongest possible terms, shows how essential it is for the Security Council to determinedly commit to a political solution to the conflict while also strengthening its humanitarian action. We thus continue to demand an immediate and lasting ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all of the hostages. Thank you.
Thank the representative of France and pass the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Madam President. And I wish to thank the delegation of Algeria for putting forward the resolution and for being fully transparent from the very beginning about the approach it intended to take. 13 years after the last request, today, another call for justice by the Palestinian people was made, but the Council's response was not enough to deliver that justice. Guyana raised its hand for justice today because, for us, it was the right choice, and it was long overdue. The Palestinian question has been before this Council since 1947. From that time, there have been at least 792 formal meetings of this Council. An examination of those meeting records provided some key revelations about the Council's approach to the Palestinian question, 3 of which I will highlight very briefly. First, over these decades, Council members have, inter alia, acknowledged the need to address the various dimensions of the Palestinian question, consistently stressed the need for the Palestinian people to exercise their right to self-determination, and emphasize the need for the realization of the two-state solution. However, while this shows that the Council has largely been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, this sympathy has not generated enough political will to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question. This takes me to my second point, Madam President. The Council's historic sympathy for the Palestinian people has led to many band-aid measures to address the symptoms of the Palestinian question. We have not been able to comprehensively address the root cause of the problem, the lengthy delay in the creation of an independent state of Palestine. The resolution we voted on a moment ago was an important step towards addressing this gap, and Guyana deeply regrets that it was not adopted. Without getting to the root of the problem, the symptoms will persist and the reactive cycle will continue. The people of Palestine deserve a clear political horizon and a path to a comprehensive and just peace. The third issue is the serious lack of accountability that has accompanied the Palestinian question from 1948 to present day. If the occupying power were held to account for its continuous violations of international law, the path to a free and independent Palestine would have been cleared a long time ago. The impunity must end. Madam President, Ghana supports the State of Palestine's full membership of the United Nations and believes that it has met all the requirements set out in Article 4 of the United Nations Charter, which are the only ones to be taken into consideration for the admission of a member into the United Nations. We are therefore deeply disappointed that the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people were not met today. Guyana had hoped that the Council's historic sympathy and apparent empathy with the Palestinian cause could have translated into strong political will this time around, given the existential threat Palestinians currently face. Notwithstanding, Guyana reaffirms its unwavering commitment to continue working with this Council and the entire UN membership to secure justice for the Palestinian people. To the Palestinian people, Guyana will never abandon you. We will continue to use our voice until justice is served. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana and pass the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Slovenia voted in favor of the recommendation of the Security Council for membership of the State of Palestine in the United Nations. The two-state solution, where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace, is the only long-term sustainable option. Slovenia continues calling for full respect of international law and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And at this point, our main objectives continue being twofold: addressing the current situation in Gaza and resuming political process towards a two-state solution. We are of the view that the membership of the State of Palestine in the UN could significantly support this process, which should address all outstanding issues, support the State of Palestine, and guarantee security for Israel. Membership in the UN is not an alternative to negotiations, but complementary to them. We believe that the UN should play a crucial role in the peace process, and therefore both states should have an equal status at the UN. Madam President, Slovenia is of the view that Palestine meets the criteria set out by Article 4 of the UN Charter. Granting membership in the UN to Palestine could be an important step towards peace. It would strengthen the role of the Palestinian Authority and would contribute to the security of Israel as well. We maintain our view that Palestine's right to self-determination and UN membership are not contrary to Israel's right to exist and be secure. We believe any two-state solution must be built on mutual recognition and sovereign equality. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia and pass the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. It was 1949 when the Republic of Korea first applied for membership to the United Nations. However, it was not until 1991, 42 long years after its original application, that the Republic of Korea given the UN membership. Thus, we can clearly attest to the meaning of aspirations of people to be admitted to these paramount international organizations. Madam President, the Republic of Korea believes that the only viable and sustainable way to resolve the Palestinian questions and establish lasting peace is through the realization of the two-state solution. Yet, for several decades, negotiations between parties have been stalled. The Republic of Korea voted in favor of the draft resolutions on the admission of Palestine into the UN in consideration of our view that renewed and strengthened efforts are needed to revitalize the path toward two-state solutions. Regardless of today's results on the draft resolution, we hope that the parties will soon resume negotiations based on dialogue and compromise for a peaceful resolution of the Palestine question. And to this end, the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza must end soon. We once again call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and expanded humanitarian aid throughout Gaza. All regional actors should exercise full restraint to avert further dangerous escalation in the region. Under this backdrop, even though today's draft resolution on the admission of Palestine was not adopted, it is clear that all members of the Security Council share the imperative of the two-state solutions as the most viable long-term resolutions to the Palestine questions and the best way to lessen long-standing regional tensions more broadly. It is to be noted that our vote today does not constitute bilateral recognition of Palestine as a state. In the future, we will consider this matter at a time that is most conducive to the resolution of the conflict. We also hope that the negotiations between parties can resume in the near future. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea and pass the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom reiterates its commitment to making progress towards a two-state solution in which a safe and secure Israel lives alongside a sovereign, viable Palestinian state. We agree that the people of the West Bank and Gaza must be given the political perspective of a credible route to a Palestinian state and a new future. And it needs to be irreversible. This is not entirely in our gift, but our recognition of a Palestinian state should be part of it. We believe that such recognition of Palestinian statehood should not come at the start of a new process, but it doesn't have to be at the very end of the process. We must start with fixing the immediate crisis in Gaza. Gaza is occupied Palestinian territory and must be part of a future Palestinian state. However, Hamas is still in control of parts of Gaza, and Israeli hostages remain in captivity. This shows that we're still at the start of the process. Ensuring Hamas is no longer in charge of Gaza and removing Hamas' capacity to launch attacks against Israel are essential and unavoidable steps on the road to lasting peace, as is working together to support the new Palestinian government as it takes much needed steps on reform and resumes governance in Gaza as well as the West Bank. We abstained on this resolution today because we must keep our focus on securing an immediate pause in order to get aid in and hostages out. Then, making progress towards a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and loss of life. Our Foreign Secretary has been in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories this week to offer our support towards achieving this. We will continue to work urgently to help bring peace and galvanize a political process towards a two-state solution which provides justice and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom and pass the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. Last month, the Security Council was able to finally adopt a resolution which demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in the hopes of bringing about a real change on the ground. However, a ceasefire has not been realized, and the humanitarian catastrophe is deepening. The people of Gaza are facing unprecedented tragedy and hardship. Much of Gaza's population lives in despair with little food and water, deprived of human dignity. In the meantime, Serious diplomatic efforts are being made to bring about a cessation of hostilities and release of the hostages. We reiterate our strong support for the crucial role of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar to this end, and appreciate their tireless efforts. Once a sustainable ceasefire is in place, a reconstruction mechanism for Gaza with the support of the international community and the establishment of effective governance by a reformed Palestinian Authority will be essential. Madam President, Japan has strongly upheld the Palestinian rights to self-determination and consistently supported a two-state solution in which Israel and the future independent Palestinian state live side by side in peace and security. We have provided maximum support for Palestinian state building efforts from political, economic, and social aspects for decades. Our principled position was reflected in our vote in favor of the 2012 General Assembly resolution granting Palestine the status of non-member observer state at the United Nations, and expressing the hope that the Security Council would consider favorably the application of Palestine for admission to full UN membership. Madam President, this is the first time since 2011 that the Security Council has deliberated on Palestinian membership in the United Nations. The intervening years have been marked by little progress in direct negotiations between the parties, whereas most recently we have witnessed escalating regional conflict that has caused untold suffering. At this critical moment, Japan voted in favor of today's draft resolution as a comprehensive decision, recognizing that Palestine meets the criteria for admission to the United Nations membership, while also taking into account the perspective of promoting the establishment of a Palestinian state through peaceful negotiations between the parties concerned. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Japan and pass the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam President. Switzerland abstained on this draft resolution. Without opposing it, we believe that at the present time, it is not appropriate for the particular situation, given the ongoing conflict. We think it would be preferable to determine Palestinians' membership at the United Nations at a future stage once there has been peace. This just will not change the position of Switzerland, our strong position on a two-state solution. We believe that only a negotiated two-state solution for Israel and Palestine living side by side in security will lead to lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. Madam President, we have just referred to a detail, the catastrophic situation in the Middle East. What we must urgently do is ensure the immediate implementation of this Council's resolutions and a ceasefire. We must do this without further ado if we want to give people the possibility of a peaceful future, which will enable everyone to live in dignity, to restore political and negotiated solutions to this conflict. Switzerland is prepared to support any effort which will lead to hope for peace through a democratic two-state solution, two states living side by side within safe and recognized borders based on the 1967 borders, including with Gaza as an integral part of a Palestinian state. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland and pass the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, today is a sad day. Because of the veto by the United States, the application by Palestine for full membership at the UN has been rejected. The decade-long dream of the Palestinian people ruthlessly dashed. China finds the decision by the US most disappointing. An independent state of Palestine has been a long-cherished intergenerational dream of the Palestinian people. Its full membership at the UN is a crucial step in that historical direction and process. As early as 2011, Palestine submitted an application. Because of some countries' opposition, the Council's action at that time was put on hold. 13 years are long enough. And yet, we still hear some complaints asserting that there isn't enough time and there's no need to rush into actions. These claims are disingenuous. The admission of Palestine as a full member of the UN is more urgent now than ever before. The relevant countries premised its inability to support Palestine in UN's membership is on the grounds that the state of Palestine does not have the capacity to govern. We do not agree with this assessment. Over the past 13 years, the situation in Palestine has changed in many ways, the most fundamental of which has been the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Palestine's viable space as a state has been steadily squeezed. The foundation of the two-state solution has been continuously eroded. The relevant countries have ignored this and adopted an attitude of acquiescence or even connivance. And now they turn around at this time and question Palestine's capacity to govern. This is gangster logic that confuses right and wrong. What is even more unacceptable is some countries challenging Palestine's eligibility for membership of the UN under the UN Charter, implying that it still remains a question whether Palestine is peace-loving. Such an allegation is outrageous and a step too far. For the Palestinian people who are suffering under occupation, this is tantamount to rubbing salt in their wounds and extremely insulting. If it is out of political calculation to oppose Palestine's full membership at the UN, it would be better to simply say so, instead of making excuses to re-victimize the Palestinian people. President, the establishment of an independent state is an inalienable national right for the Palestinian people. This cannot be subject to any questioning or bargaining. The relevant countries make direct negotiations between Palestine and Israel a prerequisite, claiming that Palestine's membership at the UN can only be the result of negotiations. This is putting the cart before the horse. There is clear clarity of Israel's rejection of the two-state solution. Against this backdrop, the admission of the state of Palestine at the UN as a full member would allow Palestine to enjoy equal status with Israel and would help to create conditions for the resumption of negotiations between the two sides. All countries that genuinely support the two-state solution should not stand in the way of Palestine's full membership at the UN. President, the wheel of history is rolling forward. The trend of the time is irresistible. We are convinced that the day will come when the state of Palestine will enjoy the same rights as other members of the United Nations, that Palestine and Israel as two states will be able to live side by side in peace as neighbors, with the two peoples, Palestinians and Israelis, living in tranquility and happiness. China will continue to make unremitting efforts and play a constructive role for the early realization of that day. And thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China and pass the floor to Ecuador.
Thank you, Madam President. Historically, Ecuador has supported the Palestinian people in their legitimate right to be free from foreign intervention, and we have supported processes which would lead to their self-determination and full independence in accordance with the founding principles of international law and the UN Charter. On the 24th of December 2010, Ecuador recognized Palestine as a free and independent state with the 1967 borders. Subsequent to that, in 2012, Ecuador co-sponsored and voted in favor of the resolution in which the General Assembly considered the condition of observer state for Palestine. And since 2014, Ecuador has maintained an embassy in Ramallah, and Palestine has an embassy in Quito. Today, once again, Ecuador's vote has shown our commitment to the Palestinian people, reaffirming our recognition, the recognition of Palestine that we made 14 years ago. And our country hopes that in the very near future, the conditions will exist which will enable this council unanimously to allow Palestine to become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador and pass the floor to Mozambique.
Madam President, Mozambique commends the presidency of Malta for convening this meeting to take action on this historic draft resolution on the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. We extend our deep appreciation to Algeria and to the entire Arab group for their leadership in tabling this text before the Council. Madam President, on August 12, 1988, the Republic of Mozambique formally recognized the State of Palestine as an independent and sovereign state. We did so because of our deep belief that peoples are born with the inherent right to self-determination, independence, and sovereignty. This right is deeply anchored in the Charter of the United Nations, in the principles and norms of international law, and in the natural law itself. It is a right that does not depend on a plebiscite or referendum, or for that matter, on a judgment of other alien peoples or governments. It is therefore on that basis that we, Mozambique, as many other nations in the world, were born and entered the concert of nations. We were admitted in the United Nations family in September 1975 after 10 years protracted liberation struggle. We wish to remind that as of today, April 18, 2024, 140 United Nations member states have extended their recognition to the State of Palestine. This quasi-universal recognition is a testament that Palestine fulfills the requirements of statehood that include population, territory, government, and the capacity to engage into relations with the other states. We consider that conditions are ripe for Palestine to be a full member of the United Nations. Under Article 4 of the Charter, and on the basis of our record since 1988, Palestine is clearly a peace-loving nation. Throughout the years, it has demonstrated its acceptance of the obligations contained in the Charter, and it has shown the ability and willingness to carry out those obligations contained in the Charter, as we said. We wish to state that Mozambique entertains diplomatic relations with the State of Palestine, of Israel. This is the foundation on which we embrace the vision of a two-state solution, of two independent and sovereign states, Israel and Palestine, both as full members of the United Nations, coexisting as good neighbors, living side by side in peace and security, as prescribed by the Charter of the United Nations and by the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. This is in particular fully in line with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, unanimously adopted by this council on November 22nd, 1967. These are, Madam President, the reasons why Mozambique has voted in favor of this draft resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Mozambique and pass the floor to Sierra Leone.
Madam President, I thank you for convening this meeting, and we commend the presidency of Malta for the manner in which it has conducted the work of the admission committee and the Security Council on the important application for admission to membership of the United Nations by the State of Palestine. I also thank Algeria for submitting the draft resolution and their leadership in the Council regarding the plight and aspirations of the Palestinian people. In the high-level open debate on the Middle East Palestine question, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone this morning elaborated on our position on the issue. That is, in the context of the request for the admission of the State of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, 13 years after Palestine's application was first considered by the Security Council Admissions Committee. Sierra Leone said recognizes the basis for such a request, which in our view is legitimate and could create the pathway to a political horizon founded on the principles of a two-state solution based on United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1812, which recommends for an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state, and in line with Article 4 of the UN Charter. Sierra Leone supported and voted for the draft resolution for the State of Palestine to be admitted as a member of the United Nations. Our support was in line and within the context of our esteemed consideration of Article 4 of the UN Charter and the guidance provided by the International Court of Justice in its 28 May 1948 advisory opinion on conditions of admission of a state to membership in the United Nations. We regret that the draft resolution was not adopted. We have the firm view that membership would have resonated with the principle of equality of states as enshrined in the UN Charter, and certainly would have strengthened the two-state solution with an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state living side by side in peace, security, and stability. The State of Palestine membership at the United Nations may have been delayed, as often in regrettable periods of injustice, but as the arc of the moral universe, which may be long but bends towards justice, the UN membership for the State of Palestine cannot be denied. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone and pass the floor to Algeria.
Madam President, again, on behalf of the Arab group, of the OIC, and the non-aligned movement, and also all peace-loving member states, I'm deeply grateful to all those who voted in favor of the resolution we submitted. The overwhelming support for the application of the State of Palestine sends a crystal clear message. The State of Palestine deserves its rightful place among the members of the United Nations. To those who were unable to support the admission of the State of Palestine, today, we hope, we really hope they will have to do so next time when the Security Council will reconsider the question of admission of Palestine again. Yes, we will return stronger and more vocal, and we will be backed by the overwhelmingly majority of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Madam President, as President Al-Majid Tebboune of Algeria has said, Algeria's effort will not cease until the state of Palestine becomes a full member of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria. I will now make a statement in my national capacity. In voting today for the admission of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, Malta has made a clear choice. We voted in favor of the two-state solution. We have voted in favor of an idea that has enjoyed the support of the vast majority of the international community for decades. UN membership is a necessary step for the Palestinians to achieve equal footing with the rest of the international community. The request for UN membership comes at a difficult juncture. The unprecedented turmoil that has followed the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza is pushing the Palestinian people to a hopeless precipice. Malta has been unequivocal that an immediate and permanent ceasefire is necessary to allow the necessary space for peace and put a stop to further civilian suffering. Concrete efforts must also be made to bolster the Palestinian Authority towards governance over a unified West Bank and Gaza Strip. We deeply regret that following today's veto, this legitimate aspiration has not been realized. However, we must not lose sight of its validity. The realization of the two-state solution, along with efforts to promote sustainable solutions to the ongoing conflicts in the region, remains the only realistic foundation for sustainable peace and stability in the Middle East. It is our collective responsibility to explore all possible paths towards this just realization. I thank you. I now resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
السيد الرئيس
Madam President,
لم يكن يوم
Madam President, our right to self-determination has never once been subject to bargaining or negotiation. Our right to self-determination is a natural right, a historic right, a legal right, a right to live in our homeland, Palestine, as an independent state that is free and that is sovereign. Our right to self-determination is inalienable. It is not tied to a time or a time frame. Our right is eternal, permanent, and continuous. It cannot be delayed. It cannot be suspended. And it has no statute of limitations. It is important that this right not be subject to manipulation or domination or conditions, especially not by Israel, the occupying power, the ethnic cleansing power, the genocidal power, the colonial power that is determined to evict our people from their homeland, to eliminate their identity and to replace their history and their culture, and to uproot their present and their civilization, and to besiege their future and their horizons. The people of Palestine will not disappear. We will not disappear. The people of Palestine will not be buried. They are a historical fact. They are a history that cannot be erased, no matter the great power, no matter the tyranny. This Palestinian people, the glorious people of Palestine, remained on their land, not out of charity or mercy from Israel, but out of patience and steadfastness and hope and sacrifice, despite the occupation, despite the oppression, despite exile, enslavement, besiege, despite being persecuted and displaced and evicted and driven away as refugees. We have repeatedly warned of Israel's colonial policy in our land, which it not simply declares openly, but now boasts of it. We have warned of the absence of a horizon for a resolution. We have warned of the dangers of ignoring the Palestinian cause and its central nature, of ignoring the suffering of the Palestinian people, which is only growing. We have warned of the dangers of claiming that a just peace is possible in our region without a just, comprehensive, and lasting resolution to the Palestinian question. Madam President, we came to the Security Council today at an important historic moment, regionally and internationally, so that we could salvage what can be saved. We place you before a historic responsibility to establish the foundations of a just and comprehensive peace in our region. You are before the opportunity to revive the hope that has been lost amongst our peoples. We put you before the responsibility of interpreting and translating your commitment towards a two-state solution along the 1967 lines into actual action, firm action that cannot be maneuvered or retracted. The majority of the Security Council members have risen to the level of this historic moment, and they have stood on the side of justice and freedom and hope, in line with the ethical and humanitarian and legal principles that must govern our world, and in line with simple logic. Here, we renew our sincere appreciation to sisterly Algeria and to the Arab and Islamic groups and the member states of the non-aligned movement and the Maltese presidency of the Council, a dedicated presidency that has managed our proceedings wisely. We express our appreciation to all of those who supported the Palestinian membership request and all of those who voted in favor of the draft resolution.
By all of your statements, those who voted in favor and even those who voted differently, of the passion that it contained in your commitment and understanding the pain and the moment of the Palestinian people. I salute you in the name of the Palestinian people and their leadership. Sayyid al-Rais.
Madam President, we accepted the two-state solution along the 1967 borders as an international vision of peace. The Arab states put forth the Arab Peace Initiative to support this vision. We built our state with the efforts of our sons and daughters and with the support and trust of the international community, despite the obstacles placed by Israel. We have engaged in the peace process in a manner that would secure our supreme national interests
and we have abided by the foundations of a peaceful and legal settlement to the conflict. The Palestinian leadership, under the presidency of President Mahmoud Abbas, continues to be committed to this peaceful track, and we renew our call for an international peace conference to be held under multilateral international sponsorship, a conference that aims to put an end to the Israeli occupation and achieve the independence of the state of Palestine. But the question remains, is there a true partner for peace in Israel? Is there a partner in peace with us in Israel? Israel insists, through its consecutive governments, it insists on maintaining occupation, on murder, on siege, on the eviction of people, on building settlements. These are all policies and practices that run counter to the United Nations Charter and to the resolutions of the United Nations, and all aim to achieve just one objective, namely to snuff out any hope of a sovereign Palestinian state, of a Palestinian state that exists as a viable state. Israel believes that the state of Palestine is a permanent strategic threat to it and will do its best to block the sovereignty of a Palestinian state and to make sure that the Palestinian people are exiled away from their homeland or remain under its occupation forever. It is up to you now to determine who loves peace and who is the enemy of peace. Who loves peace and who is the enemy of peace? Who wants to save the lives of innocents and who seeks to perpetrate genocide? Israel does not want a two-state solution. Israel does not want a state of Palestine. This is Israel's scheme. This was approved by the Knesset and is publicly announced by the Knesset members. And it's very representative in this council and anywhere in the United Nations and outside of the United Nations does so. This is a plan that is claimed by Israeli government officials and politicians. Netanyahu even boasted about this as a political achievement, boasting that he succeeded in preventing the rise of a Palestinian state. He declared this in his imaginary map, the map that he brought with him to the General Assembly last September. A map of Israel from the river to the sea. A map that annihilates the existence of Palestine. This is the plan of his extremist government to get rid of Palestine, to get rid of the Palestinians. This delusion, unfortunately, costs innocent lives. And do you know what Israel needs to implement this delusional plan? The plan to evict the people and to annex the land? All it needs is more time, more immunity, and more lives and blood. What will the international community do? What will you do? You, the International Security Council that is charged with the maintenance of international peace and security, what are you going to do? What will you do? Will you give Israel the time it needs to annex Palestinian land? Will you give it the immunity to evict the people and kill them? Will you give Israel the weapons to kill more people? Will you give Israel the right to veto our right to exist on our land? To veto the Palestinian state's right to full membership in the United Nations? Palestine's membership in the United Nations is not symbolic. It is a matter of great importance to Palestinians and to the peoples of the region at this very sensitive time. It is something that they have been awaiting since 1947.
Since 1949 until 92. We've been waiting since 1947, and we are in 2024. هي خطوة ضرورية.
This is an important step to rectify a historic injustice that befell the Palestinian people since the partition resolution and through the Nakba and until this very day. It is an important step to revive faith in international legitimacy, in international law, and in this very organization and its charter, and to revive hope in the peaceful settlement of the conflict. Giving Palestine the membership is a manifestation of our right to self-determination. It consolidates the legitimacy of the state of Palestine in a manner that is irreversible and cannot be denied by any party. It protects and preserves the land of the state of Palestine so that it is not divvied up as happened before. Palestine's membership in the United Nations is an investment in peace.
Admit us to membership. It's an investment in peace. وانطلاقا له إن عضويتنا الكاملة.
Our full membership in the United Nations does not detract from the rights of any other member state, nor does this membership threaten or cancel out the membership of any other state.
Equal to all of you. We don't want to replace anyone. We want to enter your club as equal. إن تأييدكم.
Granting Palestine full membership has put us on the path of hope, to keep the hope alive. The fact that this resolution did not pass will not break our will, and it will not defeat our determination. We will not stop in our effort. The state of Palestine is inevitable. It is real. Perhaps they see it as far away, but we see it as near, and we are the faithful. Madam President, we are the ones who experience oppression and injustice. We know more than anyone else the nature of this oppressive occupation because we live it. We know best what a just solution is, and we tell you that the time for freedom is now.
For freedom, it is the time for free Palestine. تذكروا أن بعد نهاية.
Please remember that once this session adjourns in Palestine, there are innocents paying the price with their lives and the lives of their children, the price of this Israeli action, a price to the double standards, the blind bias towards Israel, the price for the delay in justice, freedom, and peace. Madam President, the Palestinian people have borne more than they can handle. They have suffered all forms of torture at the hands of the Israeli occupier. It has become clear now, more than any time before, that this glorious people have not and will not forfeit the right to their land. Despite the gravity of the suffering, of the tragedy, of the destruction, of displacement, our Palestinian people have never lost their humanity. Our Palestinian people now are searching for the remnants of life. And you will not find a people who have a stronger desire to live an ordinary life like our people in Gaza. Gaza of pride, Gaza of glory.
بل أن شعبنا الفلسطيني كافة
Our Palestinian people, wherever they are, want life. They cling onto life, just like the other peoples on this planet. The Palestinians are a people who aspire to freedom, to a dignified life, to a peaceful existence. The people of Palestine will not disappear. The people of Palestine will not be buried. The Palestinian people have never been unnecessary. You either do us justice or you do it justice.
We love life, to live in freedom and dignity in our national homeland. We will not disappear. Either you deal with us with fairness and give us our rights, or give us our rights. Thank you very much.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to begin by thanking the United States, and particularly President Biden, for standing up for truth and morality in the face of hypocrisy and politics. Colleagues, I sat here mere hours ago describing why this resolution is destructive. I explained how the Palestinian Authority does not meet even the basic criteria, that they have no authority over their territory, and that the Palestinian Authority is a terror-supporting entity. How can you say seriously that the Palestinians are peace-loving? How? The Palestinians are paying terrorists, paying them to slaughter us. None of their leaders condemns terrorism, nor the October 7th massacre. They call Hamas their brothers. The Palestinian representative called Hamas his brothers after the massacre. And they don't even recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. You won't find even one Palestinian leader who would tell you that he recognizes Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Peace-loving indeed. Hamas wasn't mentioned here today, and it's not a coincidence, because the Palestinian representative here does not represent Hamas. He does not represent at least half of the Palestinian people. Yet, regardless of the Palestinians' failure to meet the necessary criteria for UN membership, most of you, sadly, decided to reward Palestinian terror with Palestinian state. It's very sad, because your vote will only embolden Palestinian rejectionism even more and make peace almost impossible. Please remember this the next time the Palestinians reject another peace plan or refuse to even come to the negotiating table. Colleagues, I have represented Israel at the UN for over 3 years. I have taken part in dozens of meetings in this council. And since the October 7th massacre, I have been here on a near weekly basis, sometimes daily basis. I repeat the same arguments in every debate. I plead, I convince, at least try to convince. I bring testimonies, present photos, and show video footage. But nevertheless, you refuse to even condemn. You refuse to listen. You refuse to act. You even refuse to check the facts. So today, I won't try to fix what is already broken. Speaking to this council is like speaking to a brick wall. I pray that the day will come and you will understand the magnitude of the mistake that you are making here. I pray that you will understand before it's too late. Thank you.
There are no more names inscribed in the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.